A quick Google search reveals that there are nearly 17 million memes dedicated to company mission and vision, and a scan of the first page of results shows that many are pretty funny. But why is this such a common target for humor, or more precisely, mockery and cynicism? In today's episode, we kick off our series on business strategy by going back to basics about what mission and vision are, how they differ, and why they matter. Welcome to Right in the Middle Market, a podcast about pragmatic perspectives on running, growing, and selling your business. We talk about the challenges, decisions, and most importantly, the actions business owners can take to create long-term value in their companies. Welcome to Right in the Middle Market, a podcast about running, growing, and selling your middle market business. On today's episode, we want to kick off a new series talking about strategy and strategic planning. Now, depending on your natural inclination, this may either really excite you or sound like the most dull thing you could possibly think about. Hopefully, it's not the latter. But what we really want to do, starting with today's episode and across these next several episodes on this topic, is to take a very pragmatic bent. And I know you hear us use that word all the time, but strategy is not something that is abstract. It is not something, or at least it shouldn't be something that is abstract. It is something that, when done well, really can help to drive the efficient and effective operation of an organization. So we're going to cover a number of different topics on upcoming episodes, but we want to start today with mission and vision. And I'm here with my co-host, Mark Gaffin. And Mark, we were talking about this as we were planning this episode, but I guess the first question is, aren't mission and vision the same thing?
No, they're not. And I think if you think of the whole arc of strategy planning, which I'm really excited that we are kicking off, I think it's incredibly important part. I think people don't like the outcomes because they maybe either haven't invested in the process correctly, or we're not optimized around what we're trying to get out of this. So I think that if you think of a company, an organization is a complex adaptive system, right? It's related. All these things are related. How do we get culture aligned? How do we get our vision, for where we want to be? How do we get our mission, what we do every day to achieve that mission? And then the strategy and goals and objectives, which we'll talk about in future episodes, I think will align along those fronts. What's interesting, I think, if you look at companies over time, why do they tend to fade? Why do they tend to, go out of business or just become fairly suboptimal potential earners? And only 9% of companies over 10 years actually earn their cost of capital, right? And so why is that? Why do you see margin fade? Why do you see relevance fade? And I would argue it's because we don't have potentially a good strategy or vision. We don't have a good mission, and we don't adapt both of those to dynamic things as they go forward, right? These are forward-looking things that we need to change. In concert with that, we'll talk about this, our strategy, goals, tactics, and objectives. But I think for today's episode, thinking about how do you harness a vision? How do you harness a mission? And then what are the knock-on effects there of culture, attracting, retaining people, attracting, retaining resources, and being a clear candidate for external capital, potentially even a sale?
One of the things, I guess, when I think about mission and vision, I really like the construct that mission is about what you do today and vision is about who you want to be tomorrow. And so if we dig into that a little bit, so mission then is we're talking about the what, we're talking about the how of what a company does, but vision, right? Vision is aspirational and it should be inspiring. It should be, we like to talk a lot about a BHAG, right? A big, hairy, audacious goal, but it should be something that it gets to the heart of the why. And that, to me, is why it's so important to have the vision in addition to the mission. Now, there are companies that put them in the same statement. I don't think anybody should ever feel, it hemmed in to say you have to have separate statements, but to be able to say, look, there's a component of this that is aspirational. There's a component of this that is descriptive, but you've got to find kind of that beautiful balance in between of it is inspirational without being overly vague. and connects so that somebody should be able to hear your mission and vision statement and have at least some sense of what it is that you do, how it is that you're doing it, but see where it is that you're going. Why are you doing that?
Right. I think one of the ways to start then is maybe from the mission and move out to vision and then down to goals and strategy, right? Because you're a functioning organization, we're assuming, right? What gets you out of bed? What do you do better than somebody else? Why do you do what you do? Whether you're an interior decorator or a printing company or something else, there's something about it that makes you get up in the morning, start early, get going, and then want to be the best at it. You're doing something people haven't done before. You're doing it cheaper so other people can access that, that your company. So that mission then I think is maybe arguably a place to start. And then the vision can be, to your point, aspirational. What does the world look like when we're successful?
See, now, and of course, for me, being a less structured person than you are, I think about it as if you are starting from scratch, which most of our listeners are not going to be, right? Most of them probably have something. Start with where your heart is, right? There are some people who are wired to think about the aspiration and then to be able to start to come down to the more concrete. Others need to start with the concrete and then be able to take something more aspirational. But I think in the end, you have to have both, because if you have the vision without the mission, right? It's the dream without a plan. It becomes something that is inevitably going to be empty because it's just a vision with no sense of how to get there. If you have the mission without the vision, well, you know what it is that you're doing and how you're doing it, but it's probably going to be relatively uninspired because there's no why. There's no big goal that we're shooting for across time.
Well, I take your point on that. Let me read from you what I think is maybe a counter. This is from the BBC, right? So what is the mission statement of the BBC? So the mission statement of the BBC and the British Broadcasting Corporation is, and I'm going to quote this, to enrich people's lives with programs and services that inform, educate, and entertain, right? What do we do? Who do we do it for? Kind of how do we do it? And I love their purposes, which they, as a public company, put underneath that. And these are a little more detailed. It's sustaining citizenship and civil society, promoting education and learning. And those of you who watched the BBC, you would argue that that's certainly right. Stimulating creativity and cultural excellence, representing the UK and its nations, regions, communities. Conversely, bringing the UK to the world and the world to the UK, and delivering the public benefit of emerging communication technologies and services. I really like those, right? To me, those tell me what they do. This is their mission. This is how they do what they do. And unfortunately, I think if I look at their vision statement, I'm going to love your thoughts on this. And this is the BBC. The vision statement is to be the most creative organization in the world. Now, I would argue that goes a little too far in the other direction.
But does it? I mean, I guess the question would be if that inspires. Now, I think there could be a question about how much connection is there between the vision and the mission, right? So if I listen to the mission statement that you read and then take it back to the vision statement, how much did I hear creativity and innovation in the mission statement? But to me, if that is what they believe will differentiate them, but I would have to agree. It's a little bit generic, maybe, right? It's not as specific. You could apply that to a number of different companies.
Right. And I think so I'm not disagreeing with you on the aspirational, but I think you need to be able to attach to it, right? The most creative organization in the world. I love that. I mean, I get what they're trying to do, but it's hard. There's a lot, Adobe, whatever. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are very super creative. Apple. So to be the most creative is maybe a little nebulous for me.
Yeah.
As much as I love the BBC.
Right. It is not. It surprises me, I guess, to say that that's the BBC. So let me give another example. So TED. Most of us know TED Talks. I love TED Talks. So their mission, 2 words, spread ideas. And I love that simplicity. Their vision is we believe passionately in the power of ideas to change attitudes, lives, and ultimately the world. So if I look at those two as an example, they're clear, they're succinct. Their mission is absolutely about what they do. Now, it doesn't get into the how that they do it or for whom, although my guess is that there's probably a longer version of the mission statement somewhere that probably addresses some of those. But the idea is they spread ideas. But their vision gets into why, right? Because we believe passionately, not just we believe, but we believe passionately in the power of ideas to change attitudes, lives, and ultimately the world. And so that, to me, there's a very clear connection between the mission and the vision, but the mission is about what they do. And the vision is about the why and the aspiration.
Yeah. And I guess, and again, don't want to beat on the BBC, but if you compare those two, right, you're like, man, aspirational. And I can see where we're headed with TED Talks. And you look at all the different things that TED have done, right? With there's the TED, and then I think you've been involved with TEDx here locally.
Yep. Yeah. So TEDx, which, and again, if you tie that back to their mission, right? And to say, so why would I have these wonderful premier events, the TED events that people clamor to go to, and you have to apply and be accepted to go to one of these TED events. And so why on earth would they potentially dilute their brand with local events? Well, if our mission is to spread ideas, then of course I want to do local events, right? Because I want to engage in local conversations. I want to spread ideas locally. I want to have ways and different forum to be able to get people engaged in these different ideas.
Yeah. And so to me, if I were in a strategy session, again, well, this will be down the road, but if you and I were whiteboarding ideas with the folks at TED about coming up with TEDx, right? Well, wait, does that dilute, TED, or does it? No, it's absolutely very consistent with the mission and the vision, right? It's very consistent. It might be slightly different quality, although I've looked at some TEDx stuff and been blown away by the people that are out there. But it is another channel. They're on YouTube. They don't just, they do everything they can to make TEDx content available because that's consistent with their mission to getting that out there so people can access it.
But I think you brought up another important point about the mission and vision. The mission, ultimately, in particular, the vision as well, but should be, to me, should be a litmus test for the actions of the organization. And if I think about, so many years ago, I used to work at Northwestern Memorial Hospital in downtown Chicago, and the mission was in 2 words. There was a slightly longer version, that we are an academic medical center where the patient comes first. And in 2 words, it was patients first. And what I loved about that mission statement was, first of all, it's been how many years since I worked there, and I can still articulate it without any hesitation. But it actively came into conversations that we had. I can't tell you the number of times we'd be sitting around a table, wrestling with an issue, trying to make a decision, thinking about the right thing to do and what decision we should make. And inevitably, somebody around the table would say, okay, guys, hang on. What's the right thing to do for the patient? And it would reframe the conversation instantly, and usually became really clear. This is the right thing to do for the patient. And that is what's most important to us as an organization. And so to me, a mission statement is one that makes it really clear what are the priorities of the organization, so that it should be something that can assist in day-to-day decisions and activities.
Yeah, I would argue it's important in all the things that people talk about, which sometimes they think just happen generically, right? Culture, right? So this is linked, right? You think about it. If you have a very clear, compelling mission statement and a vision statement, right? And I wanted to join a patient-centric organization, right? It's not, that's what we do, right? If I want to join Amazon, because I want Amazon, Amazon's got all these innovations because they want to do things to bring products and services to people. Anything that people want, anytime, you should be able to get through Amazon is kind of their goal. If you think of a Walmart, saving, helping people live better lives by saving more. So those things are very clear, right? And it's bound up in their culture. So I think that helps with the kind of leaders that you have in the organization, that you see, to your point, a litmus test. Who's leading, managing, and operating that's consistent with the way we want the company to operate.
And I think in an era of transparency, which is one of the things that you see changing with technology. Years ago, decades ago, it used to be that somebody might have a work persona and a private persona, a personal persona. It might be that there's a way that I am at work and a way that I am outside of work. And I think one of the things that we see changing with personal branding, with online presence, is that, you know what, you are who you are. And there's a wonderful aspect to that of, a whole movement around bringing our whole selves to work, and a very important message there around diversity and inclusion. But I think it also comes to this point of mission and vision, because if my mission is, I'll keep using the example of patients first, but on a day-to-day basis, those who interact with the organization aren't seeing that, then the overall organization is going to come off as inauthentic. And I would argue they are, right? I'm not saying that organization is, but any organization where I should be able to look at the mission and say that my experience mimics what I'm seeing. I'm going to use another example, and unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to quote it quite correctly, but Nike, and they've got a great mission statement about empowering every athlete. But what I love is there's an asterisk by the word athlete. And what they define in a subtext is, and every human who has a body is an athlete. And so I guess I'm back to this concept of inclusiveness. But so now I look at it and say, well, do they live up to that? Well, absolutely, right? Look at the ads that they put out. Look at their support of athletes like Tatiana McFadden and other Paralympic athletes. Look at what they do to encourage not just elite athletes, not just those who are already fit. And I would say, at least in their advertising, I don't have a lot of personal interaction with the company, but at least in their advertising, yeah, they live up to it.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And I think that where we talk about, to your point of inclusion, and I'm going to talk about people like the front line, right? And in your strategic planning process overall, if you're not taking inputs from those people, the people that actually work with the clients, the people who work with customers, then I think you're cheating the strategic planning process. But I think of what we have then is that vision and mission that permeate the organization. It's that desk clerk back when Nordstrom was open, and you could go into Nordstrom. No, I'm not picking on Nordstrom. I love the store. But those people had a mission, right? They knew how to act. They knew what to do with customers, and their return policy was, sometimes taken advantage of. But I mean, people understood that this is the way we're going to treat our customer. You don't have to look it up. This is the culture we have, and that's really based on how we view the client, the customers.
All right. So hopefully we've gotten a good understanding of what mission and vision are. I want to dive into some of the pragmatic applications of it right after we come back from a word from our sponsor. Right in the Middle Market is brought to you by the Gaffin Group, a full-service business consulting firm. The Gaffin Group works closely with middle market companies tackling the big challenges of today's environment and capturing the value-enhancing growth opportunities of tomorrow. Too often, dogma, platitudes, or wish lists get confused with strategy. Then it's no small wonder that execution can be muddled. The Gaffin Group principals work closely with company boards, executives, and their teams to seek pragmatic, tangible results. They provide comprehensive advisory services across strategic, financial, operational, and merger and acquisition capabilities, all framed by the fundamental belief that real strategy drives real results. The Gaffin Group is focused on delivering robust, practical insights and fact-based pragmatic solutions. Their services are designed to support their clients' profitable growth and sustainable long-term value creation. Go to gaffingroup.com to learn more about how the Gaffin Group can help you and your company. Welcome back. I'm here with my co-host, Mark, and today we are talking about mission and vision. And so in the first part, I think we've hopefully given a pretty good exploration of what the two are, how they work together. Mission is about what you're doing today. Vision is where you want to be tomorrow. It's the aspiration. So there's an awful lot of good fun and good humor, and I would say appropriately so. The number of memes I think that we could probably find around what is, making fun of mission and vision, it would be a huge search, right? I am scared to think what the Google result would be on that. But the reason for that, I think, goes back to that point of authenticity, that too often the mission statement is something that is trite. It's not seen as authentic. It doesn't guide decision making. It's inconsistent with how we act. So
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I know I pick on these posters that people throw up on the walls. It's got people rowing. It says teamwork. It's got someone else, rugby players, and it's group, whatever. And it's like, that's not what we're driving for, right? This really is important. This really is about, what we do. And really behind the scenes here is what we really do better than somebody else. So it's, what is our competitive advantage? It's really embedded behind that mission statement. So it's worth investing in. And quite frankly, it's dynamic. It's something that's going to change over time. I think if you talk to any client and said, what percentage of your, if it's a 30-year-old client, what percentage of your revenue is earned by doing things the way you did in the products that you sold, 15 years ago, they'd say none, right? Well, that's because they really have adapted, even if they've adapted into the background. And so you will see people that will do a vision statement and do a mission statement. They have it done, tick, tick, the boxes are ticked. I think you're really short-sighting your company. I know you facilitated a number of these things, and people get a bad reputation because there's some people go out to a retreat, and I always been part of these things. You're doing jumping jacks and burpees, and you come up with colors and stuff like that. And you have a whole bunch of goals and lists of things, none of which are operational, none of which are coherent in the and to your point earlier, held against that mission statement. So I mean, how would you, like, if you were doing a strategy retreat or treat, how would you incorporate using a mission and a vision? Would you start there? Would you look at it?
So I always start there, right? And first of all, you start there in the preparation as you're working with the senior executives that have asked you to come in for this retreat, and to start with, well, what is the overall mission and vision of the organization? And, tell me a little bit about the history of that, because I think that's important to understand. If it is the same mission and vision that was created when the company was founded, 25 years ago, then it's probably worth a conversation about, how often do you revisit this? Is there a sense that this is still dynamic? Is it still relevant? Is it time to update? It may be, it may not be, right? There are some that are written in a way that they are evergreen. But I think you have to ask that question. I think then the next thing that I do is, tell me about, how does that come down into the decision-making of the organization? And we've talked about decision-making on prior episodes, and it's something that I'm so passionate about, because I think ultimately when we look at companies, we're really, and when we assess a company, when we value a company, we're really looking at the cumulative impact of the decisions that they've made. So I want to understand, how is the mission and vision coming down into the decisions that the organization is making? If it is not coming into decision-making in a very real and vibrant way, it's either because we haven't set that habit, or it's because there's a disconnect between the mission and vision and what's actually happening today in the company. So let's say, once we've had all those conversations, and again, that's in preparation. So then as we come into the retreat, what I think is important is to actually have that conversation with everybody, and to get everybody starting to think about that, right? And ideally, you have a little bit of debate about it. It's, if everybody looks at it and nods and says, yep, we're all good. I mean, I guess that's good for consensus, but, it's probably not a very colorful conversation. And I love it when I can get a group to, have a couple of people that push the thinking and come around to, hopefully we've now either re-embraced and said, yeah, you know what, this really is what we're about. Or sometimes you come out of that and say, wow, things have really changed, and there are some aspects of that. But to me, again, it should be that litmus test. I know I've said that before, but as you then proceed in the process of talking about goals and objectives, and I know that's something we're going to talk about in a future episode, but this is the bar that you bring all of those things back to say, is this consistent with who we are as an organization? It may be a fabulous idea. It may be a really exciting opportunity. But if it is fundamentally inconsistent with the mission and vision of the organization, that I think one would argue that it really is not a place we should be investing resources.
Yeah. And you could think of this as if you took the strategy process planning is looking way down the road, right? So when you're in your meeting, to me, I think it would be great to pressure test, right? The vision and the mission statement. So the vision statement is probably not going to change that much because I think that's where we want to be. But look, if you're in some company or an industry that has been kind of disintermediated by technology, your vision statement probably is going to be changed, right? I mean, I don't think you're going to be cranking out solar powered desk calculators at this point anymore if you've got the iPhone.
Well, but I would argue that probably your true vision probably shouldn't have been that specific anyway.
True.
Right? The examples that we've given here today, I would argue your mission and your vision should be able to transcend some of that evolution. Again, always good to go back and ask the question. And I think this comes back to, a question that we got in recently about, do I have to change my mission and vision because of everything that's happened in 2020?
Yeah. And I would argue, hopefully not. I mean, I think if you were a printing press company, right, and you're really, really good at it, ultimately what has really, really changed, you have to be good at that. You have to keep dealing with your clients and meeting deadlines and being innovative, keeping costs down, keeping features up so people want to continue to use your product, right? People still need what you're doing. I think what's interesting about that vision and mission, if it is robust, it gives people maybe one thing right now that they're like, yeah, that's still like it was, right? So how we get there may change between if we were all sitting around tactically talking about goals and strategies and objectives over the next 6 to 9 months, that may very much have changed. I would argue, and I'm going to say probably 80% of the time, that the overall where we're trying to get to hasn't changed that much for a vast majority of the companies.
So about 20 years ago, there was a popular business book. It was one of these, small book, easy to read, called Who Moved My Cheese? Do you remember this one? Right. And I actually used it with my team when it came out. And again, this was about 20 years ago. I'm dating myself. But what I thought was interesting is very much what you're talking about, which is the lesson, or at least the takeaway that I've always had from that book is, don't hang your hat. Don't identify with the process. Identify with the outcome. And the team that I was working with at the time was truly going through a period of hyperchange. No hyperbole there. It was truly hyperchange, and no question we're in a period of hyperchange right now. And what I finally worked with my team on was to say, look, don't hang your hat on how we do it. Because you know what? Not only can I tell you that it might change, I will tell you that it will change, because we are trying to do something new. We're trying to do something that's never been done before. And so it is going to have to change as we continue to learn and iterate to make sure that we get this to something that'll work. Eventually the process will stabilize, but not anytime soon. So don't hang your hat on how we do things. Don't hang your hat and find your satisfaction in your job and your security in, I do step A and then B and then C. Hang your hat on the outcome.
One of the points that I thought was really interesting about the strategic planning process, and we'll go to this process as well, is don't let the rotation of the sun around, or the earth around the sun, dictate your strategic planning process. And I would put that in these two things in that as well. I mean, could you imagine if in October we went off to the ballroom of the hotel, we sat there for 3 days, and we came up with our strategy. We didn't bother touching our mission statement. We came up with everything. We did our budgets, and March.
You're
right?
talking about October of 2019.
Yeah, October 2019. So really, we kind of talk about, and I know we'll touch about this before, and I'm a big proponent of this, is these are ongoing processes, right? So I think your budget process is very distinct, related to, but very distinct from the strategy process. And we'll talk about both of those. I think with this mission here, it's a tool. It's a great part of how are we using this to steer. Takes a little less, it's not whipsawing around. How do we test, right? Explore versus exploit. How do we do that so we make sure that our testing in be it an analyst or a team that it's looking at, well, maybe that is a market segment we want to be. How deep is it? How much is it growing? Can we penetrate it? Can we make money there? But we're not going to change the mission statement today. We're not going to change everything. We're going to explore that. And then if we need to adapt, if it truly matches with what we think we're good at, then we do it. Otherwise, people, if they don't have it, if they have a very weak mission statement or a weak real vision of the company, then you see them going all over the place and they do a whole bunch of stuff not very well.
A good, well-written, compelling mission and vision statement spurs creativity because it makes it very clear that's where I'm going, right? That's where I'm going. That's what I'm trying to achieve. And so if you look at an environment like 2020, where all of a sudden the way that we used to do it just went away, right? Very suddenly, very dramatically, and so it can be very unsettling. But if I have that anchor, I have that outcome, and that's what I'm focused on, I can look at that and say, all right, that is still my mission. That is still my vision. I can't do it the way I used to, but that's still where I'm going. So how else am I going to get there? So on that point, we're going to wrap up 2 pragmatic tips. Let's keep it to 2. So why don't you do one and then I'll do one to wrap up our episode.
I think the first one I would ask people to do, and I think we had a great interview this morning with a deal attorney. We talked about what would be a pragmatic tip for them if people are not ready right now to do a sale. And he talked about value drivers, right, which are very, very important. What are the value drivers of my company? How do you know whether it's a value driver or not? Well, guess what? It's aligned. If it's aligned with your mission statement, it's valuable. If it's not aligned with your mission statement, it's really not. And so I would ask people to say, look at your mission statement, your vision statement. Do you think it really articulates where you are, what you do, what you're about, and where you're going? And if not, this is a perfect time to kind of get that buttoned up, because I think that kind of robustness helps you, helps your clients, helps your team, and helps your culture be resilient through these times.
So my pragmatic tip, I'm going to come back to decision making because I think it's so important. So I'm going to challenge you to look at a decision that you're making today and actively bring your mission and vision into that decision-making process. Hopefully it's something a little more complex than what am I doing for lunch today? But to think about how can I use those? And I would say, if you struggle to do that, you're probably out of touch with your mission and vision. Now, that may not mean that your mission and vision are out of touch, but to me, that's a really good way to gauge whether you are still engaged with, aligned with, and mentally, really are thinking about that mission and vision.
And Stephanie, I'd ask you, and I have a view of this too, but do you think companies do you have to be a certain size before you do this, or a certain age before you worry about these things?
Yeah, absolutely not. I think you can argue with a small or an early stage company. Let me start with early stage. An early stage company, you may want to be a little more flexible to say, look, as we learn, this may change, but I still would rather have a vision and a clear place of where I'm going, knowing that I may have to change it 6 months or a year down the road, than to just be meandering and have no vision. I'd rather have that inspiration. I'd rather have that why and to have that clear mission statement.
Right. And wouldn't you argue that that's probably in every pitch deck we do for VCs on cap raises?
Oh, absolutely. Right. I mean, it's the first thing that the VC is going to ask us when we are talking with someone about a capital raise, or quite frankly, when we're doing a sell side engagement. So, this is on our transaction side and not just on our consulting side. It comes in because they want to understand, who is this company? And then back to that point of authenticity, they're going to be looking then, as they get to know the company, to say, is this genuinely who they are? But they want to be able to know, this is the company, this is what they seek to achieve. And then they're going to look for a consistency with that.
Yeah, that's how you say, what problem are you trying to solve? And is this the right team? Of course, it's the right team, but is this the right team to lead it? So those are questions for any company. And I think if we run our companies that way at all times, that we are maximally valued for attracting external capital, be it for growth or if you want to sell, but for our kind of running, growing, and selling your business, I think this fits in every one of those areas, and it makes you a more robust company. It makes you a more focused company, and therefore a more valuable company.
And on that note, I'm Stephanie Chambliss-Gaffin, and you've been listening to Right in the Middle Market, a podcast about running, growing, and selling your middle market business. We'd love to hear your comments about today's episode or ideas for topics you'd most like to hear in the future. Specifically, if you have questions about strategy or strategic planning that you'd like to hear later on in this series, let us know. Send me a message on LinkedIn or drop me a line at podcast@gaffingroup.com. Don't forget to subscribe, and until next time, be well and be inspired.